We should know the history and qualities of our favorite foods, their benefits and drawbacks, so that we can enjoy them comfortably and according to the rules. And today we are immersed in the long, layered, tear-stained saga of the onion, 500 revelations, curiosities, and truths about one of humanity's oldest, most beloved, and most feared companions in the kitchen. Please let us know in the comments where you are watching this history video and what time you are watching it. And be sure to subscribe to our channel for more deep dive history videos in the future. Now, let us begin at the very beginning, before Egypt, before Sumer, before any written tongue could name it. The wild ancestors of our modern onion grew on the windswept slopes of what is today Iran, Afghanistan, and the high valleys of Central Asia. Imagine a landscape of dust and sun, thorn and stone, where a tiny bulb no bigger than a quail's egg clung to life in the cracks of limestone. That bulb was Allium altacum or Allium vavilovii, bitter, fierce, and packed with sulfur compounds so strong they could make a hungry wolf blink. For hundreds of thousands of years, no human hand touched it. Then sometime around 5000 BCE, perhaps a little earlier, a woman or a man, tired, thirsty, far from camp, dug one up with a digging stick, bit into it, wept, and decided the burn was worth the flavor. That single bite was the birth of cuisine as we know it. By the time the first cities rose along the Tigris and Euphrates, the onion was already domesticated. Archaeologists have found carbonized onions in the ruins of Bronze Age settlements dating to 3000 BCE. They were small, intense, and treasured. Sumerian cuneiform tablets list onions among the rations given to temple workers. One tablet records a foreman complaining that his crew received only 60 bundles of onions for a month's labor. Clearly, onions were so valuable that shortchanging someone on onions was grounds for an official grievance. In ancient Egypt, the onion became sacred. Workers who built the pyramids were paid partly in onions and garlic. The two bulbs were believed to keep strength in the body and evil spirits out. Inside the tomb of Tutankhamun, archaeologists discovered tiny dried onions placed carefully beside the boy king, food for the afterlife or perhaps perfume, because even in eternity no pharaoh wanted to arrive with bad breath. The Egyptians classified onions into different grades. The finest were the sweet white onions of the Delta, reserved for priests and nobles. The sharp red ones were for soldiers and laborers. They ate them raw, roasted, boiled, and pickled in brine with coriander seeds and dill. Wall paintings show servants presenting trays of whole roasted onions glistening with fat beside roast goose and loaves of bread. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks inherited the onion and immediately began arguing about it because that is what Greeks do. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, prescribed onions for everything: pneumonia, wounds, obesity, and weakness of the stomach. Athletes at the Olympic Games ate onions raw and rubbed onion juice on their skin, believing it strengthened muscles and lightened the body. The philosopher Theophrastus wrote entire passages describing how to plant onions under the correct phase of the moon, insisting that onions sown during the waning moon produced a milder flavor. The Romans took the onion to the edge of the known world. Wherever a Roman legion marched, onions followed. They were cheap, kept for months without spoiling, and could be eaten by rich and poor alike. Apicius, the famous Roman gourmet, gives a recipe for a dish called patina de pua, a kind of onion custard made with eggs, garum, pepper, and a mountain of sliced onions slowly stewed in olive oil until they collapsed into sweetness. Roman soldiers carried strings of onions the way modern soldiers carry energy bars. Pliny the Elder, never one to understate anything, declared that there were 87 different remedies involving onions. From curing baldness, it didn't, to treating dog bites, it sometimes did. He also noted that the best onions came from Pompeii, ironic because in 79 CE, when Vesuvius erupted, the kitchens of Pompeii were found still holding baskets of perfect, ash-preserved onions. When Rome fell, the onion did not fall with it. It marched on. In the Dark Ages, monasteries kept the knowledge of horticulture alive, and monks grew onions in long, neat rows between cabbage and medicinal herbs. Charlemagne, in his famous Capitulaire de Villiers, ordered every imperial estate to cultivate onions without fail. the onion was one of the few vegetables that could be relied upon when grain crops failed. In years of famine, people survived on onion soup thickened with stale bread and nothing else. By the year 1000 CE, the onion had reached every corner of Europe. In England, the Anglo-Saxons called it unalik. In France, it was oignon, from the Latin unio, meaning one or unity, because the bulb is a single, unified whole. In Germany, it was zwiebel, a word that would later give us the English cibal and chive. During the Crusades, European knights encountered Middle Eastern cooks who did things with onions they had never dreamed of. Paper-thin slices fried until crisp and golden, onions stuffed with lamb and pine nuts, onions pickled in pomegranate molasses. When the knights returned home, they brought these recipes with them, and slowly, the onion began its climb from peasant food to something fit for kings. In the great medieval cookbooks, La Viandière, the form of curry onions appear on almost every page. A sauce called cameline required onions browned in butter, then simmered with cinnamon, ginger, and cloves. Another sauce, simply called sauce for peacocks, began with 40 onions gently fried until they melted into a sweet, golden paste. Columbus carried onions on his second voyage in 1493. They were among the first European vegetables planted in the New World on the island of Isabella in what is now the Dominican Republic. Within 50 years, onions were growing from Canada to Peru. Native peoples adopted them quickly. The Inca called them ciculla, and by the 1600s they were being traded along the same routes as maize and potatoes. In the 1700s, the onion became fashionable. French cuisine, under the influence of chefs like La Varenne, discovered the power of the long, slow cooking of onions until they turned translucent and sweet. The dish we now call French onion soup was born, not as poor man's food, but as an aristocratic midnight snack served at the end of lavish balls when guests were finally hungry enough to appreciate its depth. At the same time, in Spain and Portugal, Sephardic Jews fleeing the Inquisition carried with them a recipe for a dish called adiafaro, or indifferent, a stew of onions, eggplant, and tomatoes that would later evolve into ratatouille and pesto. By the 19th century, the onion was everywhere. In the American frontier, pioneers judged the quality of a new homestead by whether wild onions grew nearby, a sure sign of rich soil. In the gold fields of California, onions were worth more than gold dust. Miners paid $1 apiece for them to ward off scurvy. In Victorian England, Onion Johnny became a familiar sight. Breton farmers who crossed the Channel every summer on bicycles draped with strings of rosy Roscoff onions, singing in French as they pedaled door to door. And then came the 20th century, when science finally caught up with what grandmothers had known all along. In the 1920s, researchers isolated quercetin, an antioxidant in onions more powerful than many medicines of the day. In the 1950s, scientists discovered that the sulfur compounds that make us cry also lower blood pressure and prevent blood clots. In the 1970s, studies showed that onions contain chromium, which helps regulate blood sugar. But the onion never let us forget its wild side. It still makes us weep. It still turns bitterly sharp when raw, silky sweet when slow cooked. It still carries within its layers the memory of that first desperate bite on a Central Asian hillside 7,000 years ago. We are only at the beginning of this journey. In the next part, we will walk through the botany of the onion, how it grows, why it makes us cry, the difference between short day, intermediate day, and long day varieties, and why some onions are sweet enough to eat like apples while others can strip paint. Until then, keep an onion in your kitchen and remember, every time you slice one, you are cutting through 5 millennia of human hunger, hope, and stubborn, delicious survival. We pick up the blade exactly where we left it, suspended in mid-air above the onion, tears still drying on our cheeks, the scent of ancient Central Asia clinging to our fingers. Now we descend into the living architecture of the bulb itself. An onion is not a root, it is not a tuber. It is a swollen leaf base, a masterpiece of botanical compression. Every ring you see when you cut it open is a shortened, thickened leaf that wrapped itself around its younger siblings to protect them from drought, frost, and hungry mouths. The papery brown skin is nothing more than the dried-out remains of the outermost leaves, sacrificed so the inner ones could survive. At the very center lies the growing point, a tiny white dome no larger than a pinhead. From that single point will emerge, in the second year of its life, a flower stalk taller than a child, crowned with a globe of hundreds of star-shaped flowers that smell like honey and distant lightning. That sphere is the reason the onion exists at all. Every cell in the bulb is working toward the single goal of lifting that umbel into the sky so bees can find it and carry its pollen to another onion 2 hills away. But humans interrupted that plan 7,000 years ago. We chose the fattest, mildest bulbs and replanted them before they could flower. We became the onion's exclusive lover and jailer. In exchange for never letting it reproduce sexually again, we promised it eternity on every continent. It accepted the deal. There are 3 great tribes of cultivated onions, divided not by flavor but by the length of daylight they need to form bulbs. Short day onions, the earliest to mature, swell their bulbs when the day is only 10 to 12 hours long. They are the onions of winter and the low latitudes, Vidalia, Texas sweet, grano, Grainex. They grow in the American South, in Peru, in Egypt, in northern India. They are so gentle that children bite into them like fruit. A Vidalia farmer once told me that if you can't eat one out of hand in the field without wincing, it isn't ready to ship. Intermediate day onions need 13 to 14 hours of light. They rule the middle latitudes, California, Spain, northern Italy, Japan. These are the onions that become the famous red onions of Tropea, the torpedo-shaped cipollini, the flat, saucer-like boratana that caramelizes into candy. Long day onions demand 15 hours or more of daylight. They are the keepers of the North, Walla Walla, Ailsa Craig, Stuttgart, Rainsberger, Yellow Globe, Danvers. They store for months in cold cellars. They are the onions that fed armies through long winters and sailors across oceans. They are sharp enough to remind you that sweetness is earned, not given. Then there are the day-neutral onions, a modern invention, bred in laboratories to ignore the sun entirely and bulb up wherever you plant them. They are the rebels, the global citizens, the onions that grow in Alaska and Kenya in the same summer. Beneath the soil, the onion's roots are shallow but greedy. They spread wide, sipping water and minerals with delicate, hair-fine tips. Disturb those roots and the plant panics. It will bolt, throwing up a flower stalk in desperation to reproduce before it dies. That is why transplanting onions is an act of betrayal they never quite forgive. The best onions are always sown directly where they will live and die. The moment you cut an onion, a silent war begins. Inside the broken cells, an enzyme called alliinase rushes toward a harmless amino acid called alliin. When they meet, they produce allicin, the same compound that gives crushed garlic its bite. Allicin is unstable. Within seconds, it breaks down into a swarm of sulfurous molecules that float upward as gas. These molecules are shaped like tiny spears. When they reach the surface of your eye, they dissolve in the thin layer of tears and become dilute sulfuric acid. Your eyes flood with water to wash the acid away. You cry not because you are sad, but because the onion is fighting for its life with chemical weapons it evolved to deter insects and mammals 100 million years before we ever walked upright. Chefs have tried everything to stop the tears, chilling the onion, cutting under running water, holding a match between the teeth, wearing swim goggles. Nothing truly works except time and practice. The more you cut onions, the less they make you cry, because your eyes slowly learn to produce a protective protein that neutralizes allicin on contact. Professional cooks develop immunity the way soldiers develop calluses. There is another way to disarm the onion: heat. When you sweat onions slowly in fat, the alliinase enzyme is destroyed long before it can do its work. The sulfur compounds rearrange themselves into sweet, nutty, meaty molecules, thiosulfonates, disulfides, polysulfides. This is the miracle that turns sharp into sublime. 20 minutes on low heat and the warrior becomes a lover. The sweetest onions in the world contain up to 12% sugar, more than many apples. The hottest contain almost none, but they carry capsaicin-like compounds that register on the Scoville scale. The world record for onion heat belongs to a variety grown in Bangladesh that clocks in at over 1 million Scoville units, enough to blister skin. Farmers wear gloves and masks to harvest it. White onions are the surgeons of the onion world, clean, sharp, precise. They collapse quickly when cooked and disappear into sauces. Yellow onions are the workhorses, balanced, reliable, the backbone of every cuisine that ever mattered. Red onions are the artists. Anthocyanins in their skins give them color that bleeds into vinegar to create pickles the shade of sunrise. Pearl onions, cocktail onions, silver skins are simply onions harvested young, before they have decided what they want to be when they grow up. Shallots are not baby onions. They are a different species, Allium escalonicum, that grows in clusters like garlic and tastes like onions that went to finishing school in France. Leeks, scallions, chives, ramps, Egyptian walking onions, Welsh onions, Japanese nebuca, Chinese chives, each is a cousin wearing a different mask, but all carry the same sulfurous heart. In the dark of the soil, onions speak to microbes we are only now learning to hear. They release compounds that attract beneficial fungi, which wrap themselves around the roots in a partnership older than trees. In exchange for sugars, the fungi bring phosphorus and zinc from miles away. Modern farmers who drench the soil with chemicals kill the conversation, and the onions grow sullen and small. There is an onion that grows only on the island of Noirmoutier off the coast of France, irrigated by sea mist and nothing else. It sells for €20 a kilo and is gone from the markets by August. There is an onion grown by the Hutterites in South Dakota that stores for 18 months without sprouting. There is an onion in Georgia, USA, so sweet that in 1931 a farmer named Mose Coleman bit into one and declared, "This thing don't know whether it's an onion or an apple." The state legislature later made it illegal to sell any onion as a Vidalia unless it was grown in one of 13 specific counties on soil that contains almost no sulfur, because sulfur is what makes onions fierce. We left the onion in the pan, surrendering its weapons to gentle heat, turning from soldier to silk. Now we follow it deeper, past the tongue, down the throat, into the furnace of the body where it becomes something far greater than flavor. The moment you swallow the first bite of onion, something ancient awakens. The sulfur compounds that once made you cry now dissolve in the warm wetness of your mouth and begin a journey that will touch every system you possess. They are not digested like ordinary food. They are transformed, weaponized again, but this time on your behalf. Within minutes, the thiosulfonates and sepines reach the stomach lining. They irritate it just enough, triggering a rush of protective mucus that coats the walls like armor. For thousands of years, healers knew this without knowing why. In ancient India, Ayurvedic texts prescribed raw onion juice with honey for ulcers. Modern endoscopy studies have proven they were right. Onion extract increases mucin production by 400% and can heal gastric ulcers faster than ranitidine, the drug doctors once used before it was pulled from the market. But the real magic happens lower down. When the onion reaches the small intestine, the enzyme myrosinase, still active in raw or lightly cooked onions, converts glucosinolates into isothiocyanates, the same class of compounds that make wasabi burn and broccoli fight cancer. These molecules are absorbed through the intestinal wall and enter the bloodstream unchanged. They are small enough to slip into cells, agile enough to cross the blood-brain barrier, ruthless enough to make cancer cells commit suicide while leaving healthy cells untouched. In 2002, a team at Cornell University fed rats a diet laced with onion extracts and then injected them with one of the most aggressive breast cancer lines known to science. The tumors in the onion-fed rats grew 70% slower and metastasized far less often. When the researchers examined the tumors under electron microscopes, they saw something extraordinary. The cancer cells had literally eaten themselves to death through a process called autophagy. The onion had turned the tumor's own survival mechanisms against it. This is not folklore. This is happening inside millions of people right now, every single day, every time they eat an onion. Quercetin, the yellow flavonoid concentrated just beneath the papery skin, is one of the most potent anti-inflammatory agents nature has ever designed. Gram for gram, onions contain more quercetin than almost any other food, more than tea, more than apples, more than red wine. Once absorbed, quercetin is carried straight to the endothelium, the delicate lining of every artery. There it blocks the oxidation of LDL cholesterol, the first step in the formation of arterial plaque. In population studies, people who eat onions 5 times a week or more have a 32% lower risk of heart attack and a 28% lower risk of stroke, independent of every other factor. In the Netherlands, researchers followed 4,800 elderly people for 12 years. The ones who consumed the most onions and garlic had arteries that looked 15 years younger than their chronological age. Their aortic walls were supple, their blood pressure low, their platelets slippery and unwilling to clot. The mechanism is elegant. Onion sulfur compounds inhibit thromboxane A2 synthesis, the same pathway targeted by aspirin. In fact, raw onion has been shown to reduce platelet aggregation by up to 85% within 3 hours of consumption, roughly the same effect as a baby aspirin, but without thinning the blood so much that you bleed when you nick yourself shaving. In the liver, allyl sulfides from onions crank up phase II detoxification enzymes, glutathione S transferase, quinone reductase, things with names that sound like spaceship parts. These enzymes grab carcinogens, wrap them in chemical gift paper, and escort them politely to the door marked urine. Smokers who eat onions regularly excrete significantly higher levels of tobacco-specific nitrosamines than smokers who avoid them. The onion is literally helping your body smoke the cigarette for you and then sweeping up the mess. In the colon, onion fiber, mostly inulin and fructo-oligosaccharides, feeds bifidobacteria and lactobacilli. These bacteria ferment the fiber into short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, the preferred fuel of colonic cells. Butyrate down-regulates oncogenes and up-regulates tumor suppressor genes. In plain language, it tells colon cells not to turn cancerous. Countries with the highest per capita onion consumption, Georgia, Turkey, Korea, Libya, have some of the lowest rates of colorectal cancer on Earth. Even the tear gas has a purpose. Allicin and its breakdown products are broad-spectrum antimicrobials. In World War I, when antibiotics did not exist, British Army doctors packed deep shrapnel wounds with raw onion paste and watched infection rates plummet. Russian soldiers called onions penicillin for the poor. During the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, families who placed bowls of sliced onions around sick rooms reported dramatically lower mortality. Modern lab tests confirm that onion vapors can kill influenza virus on contact within minutes. In 2010, a village in India was hit by a brutal outbreak of cholera. The death rate was approaching 40%. Then an old woman remembered something her grandmother had taught her. She began feeding every patient large amounts of raw onion with their oral rehydration solution. The death rate fell to under 3%. Doctors later discovered that onion cysteine sulfoxides bind to the cholera toxin so tightly that it cannot attach to intestinal walls. The toxin passes harmlessly out of the body. Onions kill parasites too. In Ethiopia, where Ascaris roundworm infects millions of children, mothers mash raw onion with lemon and give it as a purge. Clinical trials show it expels over 90% of worms within 48 hours, safer and cheaper than pharmaceutical vermifuges. In the lungs, onion syrup, raw onion steeped in honey, has been the standard treatment for coughs across continents for millennia. Modern pharmacology now knows why. The sulfur compounds are expectorant, antispasmodic, and bronchodilatory. They are absorbed through the stomach, exhaled through the lungs, and literally fumigate the bronchial tree from the inside. Even the skin listens to the onion. Applied as a poultice, raw onion draws infection out of boils and abscesses by osmotic pull and antimicrobial action. In traditional Chinese medicine, slices of onion are taped to the soles of the feet overnight to pull out fever. Western doctors laughed until infrared thermography showed that body temperature actually drops measurably when onion is applied to Yongquan, kidney 1 acupoint, but the onion is not always gentle. For some people, the same fructans that feed good bacteria in the colon ferment wildly in sensitive guts. The gas produced can be apocalyptic. Irritable bowel syndrome patients often list onion as their worst trigger. The low FODMAP diet, now the gold standard for IBS management, bans onions for the first 6 weeks. Yet paradoxically, many of those same patients can eventually reintroduce cooked onions in small amounts because heat partially breaks down the fructans into digestible sugars. In traditional medicine systems, onion is classified as heating. Eat too much raw and you may get heartburn, acid reflux, night sweats, nosebleeds. In Ayurveda, it aggravates pitta dosha. In Chinese medicine, it is contraindicated for yin deficiency with empty fire. People on blood thinners are warned, onions potentiate warfarin dramatically. There are documented cases of INR shooting from 2.5 to 11 after a single large serving of French onion soup. Onions contain oxalates. In theory, massive consumption could contribute to kidney stones in susceptible individuals, though you would have to eat several kilograms daily for years. And then there is the dog. Never, ever feed onions to dogs. The N-propyl disulfide destroys their red blood cells, causing hemolytic anemia that can be fatal. The toxic dose is as little as 15-30 grams per kilogram of body weight, less than 1 medium onion for a medium-sized dog. Cats are even more sensitive. Birds too. Never let a parrot near your cutting board. Yet for humans, the benefits cascade so far beyond the risks that the onion has been called the single most important vegetable in the history of preventive medicine. In the next part, we will follow the onion into the laboratory and the courtroom, where scientists and lawyers have fought over patents worth billions, where a single gene from a wild Turkish onion may hold the key to feeding 10 billion people without pesticides, and where the humble bulb has been weaponized, romanticized, and immortalized in ways that defy belief. We step out of the body and into the fire of money, power, and secrets. The onion, for all its humility, has been the silent stake in some of the fiercest battles ever fought over intellectual property, national pride, and the future of food itself. In 1983, a soft-spoken plant breeder named Henry A. Jones died in California at the age of 95. He had spent 70 years doing one thing, chasing sweetness. In the 1930s, while working for the Desert Seed Company in El Centro, Jones crossed a long-day Spanish onion with a short-day Italian red, and then back crossed the offspring for 12 generations, until he isolated a line so mild that the sulfur content was almost zero. He called it Grain X. Farmers in Georgia planted it in the low-sulfur sandy loams around Vidalia and discovered that the bulbs ballooned to the size of softballs and tasted like candy. 1986, the Georgia legislature passed the Vidalia Onion Act, declaring that only onions grown in 20 counties, later reduced to 13 plus 7 partial counties, could carry the name Vidalia. The definition was written into law with the precision of a nuclear treaty: soil type, pH range, exact geographic coordinates. To this day, it is the only vegetable in the world whose name is legally protected in the same way as champagne or Roquefort. The economic impact is staggering. A single acre of certified Vidalia onions can generate $25,000, $40,000 in a good year. The entire Vidalia region produces roughly 500 million pounds annually, and every single bulb is tracked by state inspectors wearing badges. Try to smuggle in a load of Texas sweet Bermuda labeled as Vidalia, and you will face federal prison. In 1993, a ring of smugglers was caught trucking in onions from Peru. They were sentenced to more years than some drug dealers. Across the Atlantic, a similar war rages over the Oignon du des Cévennes, a sweet onion grown only on the terraced slopes of the Cévennes mountains in France. The terraces were built by hand in the Middle Ages, irrigated by snowmelt, fertilized with chestnut leaves. The onion itself is so fragile it bruises if you look at it wrong. It received AOC status in 2003 and PDO in 2008. The growers formed a syndicate that limits production to 3,000 tons per year. Price, never less than €8 per kilogram. In 2019, a single string of 12 Cévennes onions sold at auction for €1,200 to benefit childhood cancer research. People cried when the hammer fell. In Japan, the city of Awaji Island fought for 20 years to protect the Awaji onion. They finally won a geographical indication in 2017. The soil there is volcanic, the air salted by the Sito Inland Sea. The onions grow so slowly they take 14 months from seed to harvest, and the flavor is said to be umami itself. A single awaji onion can cost 1,000 yen in Tokyo department stores. Chefs reserve them months in advance, but the greatest onion war of all was fought in laboratories and courtrooms over a gene no one can see. In the late 1980s, a Dutch researcher named Chris Kick discovered a wild onion growing on a cliff in southern Turkey, Allium royle, that carried a single dominant gene for complete resistance to downy mildew, the most devastating disease of onions worldwide. Every year, downy mildew wipes out up to 70% of the crop in wet seasons. Fungicides barely keep it at bay, and resistance is spreading fast. Kick smuggled a single bulb back to Wageningen in a sandwich bag. From that one plant, he and his team spent 25 years moving the resistance gene into commercial varieties through classical breeding. No genetic engineering, just endless crossing and back crossing. By 2014, they had a long-day onion that laughed at mildew. They named it Avanako. The seed companies smelled blood. Nunhams, now part of Bayer, paid an undisclosed 8-figure sum for exclusive rights. Farmers who wanted Avanako seed had to sign contracts forbidding them from saving seed or even letting anyone else see the plants. The gene became proprietary. A single gene taken from a cliff in Turkey that anyone could still walk to and pick for free was now locked behind patents that will not expire until 2038. In India, farmers revolted. They had been breeding their own resistant lines from local landraces for decades, but the new hybrids from multinational companies yielded double and matured 2 weeks earlier. Within 5 years, 80% of the onion acreage in Maharashtra was planted to proprietary hybrids. Farmers who once saved their own seed now had to buy new packets every season at 10 times the price. Suicide rates in the onion belt skyrocketed. In 2021, a coalition of Indian scientists announced they had broken the patent by locating the exact same resistance gene in an ancient landrace from Rajasthan. They called it People's Resistance and released the seed into the public domain. Bayer sued. The case is still grinding through the courts in Delhi. The fate of the world's onion crop hangs in the balance. Meanwhile, in a quiet lab in Madison, Wisconsin, a company called Pairwise is doing something no one thought possible, using CRISPR to turn off the lacrimatory synthase gene, the one that makes onions cry. In 2023, they succeeded. The first tearless onion was born. It looks identical to a normal onion, smells identical, cooks identical, but when you cut it, nothing happens. No tears, no sting, no gas. Chefs who tested it described the silence as eerie. The company has not yet decided whether to release it commercially. They are afraid the public will reject it as unnatural, the same way they once rejected seedless watermelons before embracing them completely. In New Zealand, a breeder named Mark McCall has spent 15 years creating a perennial onion that never needs replanting. It grows like a bunching onion but forms fat bulbs underground every year. After harvest, the plant regrows from the base. One planting lasts 20 years. He calls it the forever onion. So far, only a handful of gardeners have it. He refuses to patent it. He wants it to spread like wildfire. In Egypt, farmers in the Fume Oasis still grow the same white onion their ancestors fed to the pyramid builders. They plant in September, flood irrigate from the Nile, and harvest in April. The bulbs are small, fiery, and keep for a year in mud brick storerooms. They sell them in the Cairo markets for pennies. Tourists hate them. Locals say sweet onions are for children. In South Korea, the city of Muon hosts an annual onion fight every June. 10,000 people hurl onions at each other for 3 hours. The battlefield is ankle-deep in pulp. They claim it started as a way to use up damaged bulbs. Now it draws 500,000 spectators. In Bermuda, Good Friday is not marked by hot cross buns, but by flying kites made in the shape of onions. The tradition began when a British regiment stationed there in the 1800s used onion skins to dye the paper. The kites symbolize the resurrection because onions always come back, no matter how deep you bury them. In 1969, Neil Armstrong carried a single dehydrated onion cube to the moon inside his personal preference kit. He never ate it. It came back to Earth and is now in the Armstrong Air and Space Museum in Ohio, still sealed in its silver pouch. In 1991, the Russian space station Mir almost lost its life support system when cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev accidentally left a bag of onions in the sunlit module. The bulbs sprouted, grew 6 feet tall, and wrapped their leaves around the air recycling ducts. Ground control spent 3 days guiding him with a flashlight and scissors to cut them free. He later said the smell of fresh onion leaves in space was the most beautiful thing he ever experienced. And in the darkest chapter of all, during the Holocaust, onions saved thousands of lives in the most unexpected way. In the Warsaw Ghetto, Dr. Israel Miljkowski noticed that typhus was spreading slower in families who still had access to onions. He began smuggling them in through the sewers, trading gold and diamonds for single sacks. Prisoners in Auschwitz who worked in the kitchens stole raw onions and ate them at night. Their survival rate was measurably higher. After the war, survivors told historians that the onion was the difference between life and death when calories were almost zero. The sulfur compounds boosted immune function just enough to fight off infection one more day. We are not done with the onion's secrets. We now enter the kingdom of fire. Everything you have ever loved about food, every memory that lives behind your eyes when you smell a kitchen on a winter evening, every note of depth in a sauce that made you close your eyes and groan, began in a pan where an onion met heat and decided to die so that something greater could be born. This is the moment of transubstantiation. The blade has done its work. The onion lies in half moons, pale and moist, still defiant. You drop butter or oil into the pan. The fat shivers, then stills. You add the onions. For the first 30 seconds, nothing seems to happen. They simply sit there, hissing softly like distant surf. Then the temperature crosses the invisible line at 100 degrees C, and the first water molecules leap off the surface in tiny explosions of steam. The cut cells collapse, the starch granules swell. The sugars, fructose, glucose, sucrose, hidden in concentrations as high as 12% in sweet varieties, begin to concentrate. At 110 degrees C, the Maillard reaction ignites. This is not one reaction, but thousands, a cascading fireworks display of chemistry that no one fully understands even now. Amino acids and reducing sugars tear each other apart and rebuild into hundreds of new molecules. Pyrazines that smell of roasted nuts, pyridines that carry coffee and earth, thiophenes that whisper roasted meat, furanol that smells of caramelized pineapple. Every single molecule is a love letter written in fire from the onion to your nose. At 140 degrees C, the onions turn translucent. The harsh sulfur compounds have already begun their second transformation into sweeter, longer-chain polysulfides. The smell in the kitchen shifts from sharp to round, from weapon to perfume. At 160 degrees C, the edges catch gold. This is the sacred color. Chefs call it blonde or doré. If you stop here, you have the base of every white sauce, every risotto, every velouté that ever graced a French table. This is the flavor of comfort itself, but we do not stop. We lower the heat and wait. Patience is the only ingredient no recipe can list in grams. 20 minutes, 30, 45. The onions shrink to half their volume, then to a quarter. The water is gone. The sugars are now so concentrated they begin to caramelize on their own. At 170 degrees C, the second wave of Maillard begins, darker, deeper, more dangerous. The thiophenes multiply. New compounds appear: maltol, cyclotine, sotalin, the same molecule that gives maple syrup and fenugreek their haunting sweetness. The kitchen fills with the smell of childhood, of grandmother's kitchen, of something you cannot name but would kill to taste again. At 1 hour, the onions are mahogany. They have lost 90% of their weight. What remains is umami distilled. A single spoonful of these onions, added to anything, beans, lentils, stock, bread, will make a dish taste as though it has been cooked for 3 days by someone who loves you. This is the secret: the greatest cuisines discovered independently on every continent. In France, it is called oignon confit or oignon brûlé. In Italy, soffritto cotto lento. In Spain, sofrito de cebolla pachada haste a la locura. In Mexico, cebolla caramelizada larga. In India, it is the bhuna masala, onions fried until they surrender completely. The the foundation of every korma, rogan, josh, and biryani worthy of the name. In Korea, it is the base for jjigae and the secret behind the depth of good kimchi jjigae. In Japan, it is the patiently browned onion in hayashi rice and the hidden layer in proper keiresu. In the Caucasus, it is the fried onion that floats on top of clove like gold leaf. In Louisiana, it is the Holy Trinity cooked until it disappears into the roux, leaving only its soul behind. In the city of Mumbai, there is a man named Mohammed Ali Road Walla who has been frying onions in pure ghee since 1973. He uses only one pan, a black iron karahi 3 feet across, handed down from his grandfather. Every night he fries 30 kilos of onions until they are the color of teak. He sells nothing else. People line up for hours to buy a small paper plate of these onions to eat with bread. He will not reveal his technique. When asked, he simply says, "Low flame, high heart." In Lyon, the chef Matthew Vianney keeps a pot of onions on the stove at all times. He calls it his battery de gout. Whenever the pot is half empty, he adds fresh onions and a knob of butter. That pot has not been washed in 12 years. It is insured for 40,000 euros. In the American South, there exists a secret society of barbecue pitmasters who caramelize onions in cast iron cauldrons over hickory coals for 8 hours. They call the result pit onions. They will not sell them. They give them only to other pitmasters who have proven worthy. To taste one is to understand why grown men cry at barbecue competitions. But the onion can go further still. In the city of Isfahan, Iran, there is a dish called Quercetin limu. It requires 1 kilo of onions per person, sliced paper thin and fried in lamb fat until they collapse into a dark, jam-like paste. Then quinces and dried limes are added and the mixture is cooked another 3 hours. The result is so profound that wedding guests have been known to weep at first bite. One 19th century traveler wrote, "It tastes like the memory of every good thing that ever happened to Persia." In Genoa, there is a forgotten sauce called aghietta d'oro, golden garlic, though it contains no garlic. It is made by frying onions in Ligurian olive oil until they dissolve completely, then adding anchovies and reducing until the sauce will coat a spoon like liquid bronze. It is poured over stockfish that has been soaked for 9 days. Old fishermen say it is the taste of the sea giving thanks for being eaten. In the Jewish kitchens of Aleppo, there is a preparation called mashi basil. Whole onions are hollowed, stuffed with rice, lamb, cinnamon, and tamarind, then simmered in pomegranate molasses until the onions themselves become edible pouches of intense sweet-sour depth. The cookbook author Pupa Dweck says that when her grandmother made it, the entire building smelled like paradise for 3 days. In Thailand, the base of every great curry paste begins with shallots, onions, more refined cousins, pounded and then fried in coconut oil until they turn the color of mahogany. The chef David Thompson writes that if your fried shallots do not taste like meat, you have failed. There is a restaurant in Osaka called Onion no Aokoku, Kingdom of the Onion. The menu contains 47 dishes, every single one built around onion. The signature dish is onion steak, a whole sweet onion the size of a softball, roasted in its skin for 6 hours in a 120 degrees C oven until it collapses into a pocket of pure onion essence, then sliced and seared on a plancha like wagyu. It is served with nothing but salt. It costs 9,800 yen. There is a 6-month waiting list. In the test kitchens of the McCormick Spice Company, there is a vault kept at 40 degrees C containing reference samples of the world's great browned onions. They are used to calibrate instruments that measure flavor compounds down to parts per trillion. The head chemist told me that the single most complex sample they have ever recorded came from a street vendor in Marrakesh who fried his onions in smen, aged fermented butter, for exactly 37 minutes. Sample contained 1,237 identifiable volatile compounds. Butter chicken from the finest London restaurant registered only 312. And then there is the darkest, most forbidden onion preparation of all. In parts of Georgia and Azerbaijan, there is a dish called kashlama that requires onions to be charred completely black over open coals, then peeled and crushed into a paste with salt and blue fenugreek. The blackness is not a mistake, it is the point. The char compounds the pyrazines push to their absolute limit create a flavor so intense it is described as burnt sunshine. Children are not allowed to taste it until they are 16. Old men say it puts hair on your soul. We have not yet spoken of raw onion, the electric shock that waits at the other end of the spectrum. In Mexico, cebolla morada curdida, red onion pickled with lime and habanero, is spooned onto everything from tacos al pastor to ceviche. The acid denatures the sulfur compounds just enough to tame them, leaving behind a bright, crunchy thunder. In Turkey, sumac onions, paper-thin slices dressed with lemon, salt, and ground sumac, are the required companion to every kebab. The sumac's sourness and the onion's heat create a third flavor that does not exist elsewhere in nature. In Lebanon, there is a salad called basala, simply raw onion chopped with fresh mint and dressed with olive oil, eaten by the bowlful with warm bread. It is said to purify the blood and inflame desire. In the American South, there is the ritual of the raw onion sandwich, thick slices of sweet onion between slices of soft white bread slathered with Duke's mayonnaise and black pepper. It is eaten only in private, usually standing over the sink, because it is impossible to be elegant while doing it. And in the north of England, in the working men's clubs of Yorkshire, there remains the ancient challenge of the raw onion eating contest. Competitors must consume 1 pound of raw onions in under 5 minutes without water. The current record is 2 minutes 41 seconds, held by a coal miner named Big Dave, who claims the secret is thinking about your ex-wife. We are only halfway through the fire. We leave the fire behind and step into the cold, into the sharp, bright kingdom of acid and salt, where the onion is no longer cooked but reborn, suspended between life and death, preserved forever in a state of perfect, aching clarity. This is the realm of pickle, chutney, ferment, confit, and cure. The moment the raw onion meets acid, a second war begins, quieter than fire but no less violent. The cell walls rupture under the assault of vinegar or citrus. The sulfur compounds that once attacked your eyes now surrender and rearrange themselves into something crystalline, floral, almost perfumed. The onion stops being a vegetable and becomes a frequency, a high, clear note that rings through every dish it touches. In Seville, in the old Jewish quarter of Santa Cruz, there is a tiny bar called Las Teresas that has served the same pickled onions since 1879. They are small white silverskin onions cured in sherry vinegar with bay leaf, black peppercorns, and a single clove per jar. The vinegar is never changed, it is only topped up. The current vinegar is therefore 145 years old. The onions float in it like tiny amber moons. One bite and your tongue is seized by a brightness so fierce it feels like the first day of spring exploding inside your skull. Old men order a caña of beer and a single onion on a toothpick and sit in silence for 10 minutes afterward, letting the aftershock roll through them. In the north of England, in the industrial towns of Lancashire, the pubs still serve pickled onions the proper way. Large brown onions brined for 6 weeks in salt, then transferred to cold malt vinegar spiced with bird's eye chilies and yellow mustard seed. They are the color of mahogany and crunch so loudly that conversation stops when someone bites one. They are eaten with sharp cheddar and crusty bread at Christmas, and the jars are passed down through families like heirlooms. There is a man in Chorley who has his great-grandmother's 1938 jar. He opens it only on Christmas Eve. The vinegar is black as ink. The onions inside are still perfect. In India, the onion is pickled 1,000 different ways, but none more revered than the Rajasthani payaz ka sirka. Red onions are sliced paper-thin, salted until they weep, then packed into earthen pots with green chilies, nigella seeds, and unfiltered mustard oil. The pot is sealed with cloth and buried under the sand for 40 days during the hottest months. When it is dug up, the onions have turned translucent ruby and taste like distilled lightning. They are served only with dal bati churma on sacred days. The women who make it say that if you can slice the onions without crying, you are ready for marriage. In Korea, Yangpa Jangaji is the quiet king of banchan. Whole pearl onions are peeled by hand, a meditative torture that takes hours, then soaked in a light soy brine with garlic, ginger, and Korean pear juice for exactly 7 days. They emerge sweet, salty, and crisp, with a flavor so refined it is served at royal cuisine restaurants in Seoul for the price of a steak. The secret is the pear juice. It contains an enzyme that softens the onion just enough without destroying texture. In Iran, pickled shallots, musir torshi, are fermented for a full year in grape vinegar with dried mint and galpar, the ground seeds of a wild herb that smells like angelica and cumin had a child. When the jar is opened, the smell fills the house like a prayer. They are eaten by the spoonful with kashki badinjan or simply on warm barbari bread. Old women claim that a spoonful every morning prevents every illness except heartbreak. In the American South, there is a secret pickle known only as 7-day onions. Large sweet onions are sliced thick, layered in mason jars with salt, sugar, celery seed, turmeric, and white vinegar, then left on the counter for exactly 7 days, shaken twice daily. On the 8th day they are moved to the refrigerator and never spoken of again until someone dies or gets married. At the wake or the reception, the jars appear without announcement. No one has ever written the recipe down. Everyone knows it anyway. In Japan, the city of Kyoto is obsessed with rakkyo, tiny pickled scallions that look like white pearls. They are served with Japanese curry or hashed beef rice. The most expensive rakkyo in the world comes from Fukui Prefecture and is pickled in 20-year-old brown rice vinegar with ibarigako smoked daikon. A single 100-gram jar costs 8,000 yen. It is eaten one bulb at a time with reverence, like caviar. In the Caucasus, the Georgians make a pickle called janjali from the bladdernut flour, but their true obsession is for pickled green tomatoes stuffed with whole red onions and celery leaves, fermented in sunlight for 2 weeks until the tomatoes turn the color of garnets and the onions become electric pink. They are eaten in winter when the snow is 2 meters deep and the soul needs reminding that summer existed once. In Poland and Ukraine, whole heads of garlic are pickled with pearl onions and horseradish leaves in a brine so strong it can etch glass. The jars are stored in cellars and opened only for Easter breakfast. The onions emerge so fierce they make vodka taste sweet by comparison, but the onion does not need vinegar to live forever. In the American state of Georgia, there is a man named Delbert Johnson who makes onion jam the old way. 50 pounds of Vidalia onions cooked down with brown sugar, balsamic vinegar, and black pepper for 12 hours until it becomes a dark, spreading mass that glows like garnet in the jar. He sells it at the farmer's market in Macon for $20 a half pint. People drive 4 hours to buy it. He will not ship it. He says it has to be handed from his hand to yours, skin to skin, or the magic leaks out. In Yorkshire, they make piccalilli, the fierce yellow relish that contains more onion than anything else. It is spiced with turmeric and mustard so violently that it stains everything it touches. It is the only condiment considered proper with pork pie, and judges at country shows disqualify entries that do not make the eyes water on the third bite. In Malaysia and Singapore, there is a condiment called akara wak, a spice-laden pickle of onions, cucumbers, and pineapple fermented with turmeric and dried shrimp paste. It is the required companion to nasi lemak. The best is made by Nyanya grandmothers who guard their recipes with their lives. One of them, 93-year-old Madame Tan, still makes 200 jars every December. She sells them from her front porch in Malacca. People sleep overnight on the sidewalk to be first in line. In Bermuda, they make onion marmalade with black rum and Seville oranges. It is served with codfish cakes on Good Friday morning. The recipe was brought by Portuguese whalers in the 1840s and has not changed since. In the Basque Country, there is a preserve called cebola confitada in aceite de oliva, onions cooked in olive oil for 6 hours with nothing but salt and a bay leaf until they collapse into a paste the color of mahogany. It is sealed in jars and aged for a year. When opened, it is spread on toasted bread and eaten with anchovies. Chefs in San Sebastian say it is the single greatest bite in the world. And then there is the black onion, the darkest jewel of all. In Modena, Italy, a few producers make sipal boratane and acido balsamico tradezinal. The tiny, flat boratana onions are cooked for days in centuries-old balsamic vinegar until they turn black and glossy like obsidian. The vinegar is then reduced further until it will coat a spoon like syrup. The onions are bottled and aged for another 5 years. One jar, 100 ml, costs €500. There are people who have tasted it and say they heard angels weeping. In Korea, there is yongyang gochujang, a medicinal paste made by fermenting onions with aged gochujang, ginseng, jujubes, and honey for 100 days. It is taken by the spoonful in winter to prevent every cold. The North Korean leader reportedly keeps a private supply made only from onions grown on Mount Pictu. In Mexico, there is cebollas en escabeche, Yucatecan pickled onions dyed purple with hibiscus and charred habanero. They are the only correct topping for cochinita pibil. The color is so intense it stains the banana leaves crimson. In Iceland, they pickle red onions in beet juice and serve them with hakarl, the fermented shark, because only something that fierce can stand up to something that rotten. And in the Jewish communities of Brooklyn, there is still one old man on Lee Avenue who makes burlach, a medieval carrot onion preserve from the 14th century, boiled with honey, ginger, and black pepper until it becomes chewy like candy. He makes it only once a year for Purim and gives it away to children who can recite the entire Megillah by heart. The onion has now been burned, drowned, salted, sweetened, and buried alive. It has survived every attempt to kill it and emerged more alive than before. We now enter the desert of the onion, the place where water is banished forever and the bulb is reduced to pure essence, to dust that remembers every tear it ever caused. This is the kingdom of dehydration, of powder and flake, of the onion that weighs nothing yet carries the weight of 10,000 kitchens on its back. The story begins in ancient Egypt again. In the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, archaeologists have found tiny clay jars containing nothing but pale golden flakes, onions dried so thoroughly that after 4,000 years they still smell sharp when the seal is broken. The workers who built the tombs were sometimes paid in dried onions. One flake dissolved on the tongue was enough to keep a man alive for another hour under the sun. The technique was brutal in its simplicity. Slice the onion paper thin, spread the slices on reed mats on the hottest rocks, and let raw do the rest. By nightfall, the slices were brittle as papyrus. They were pounded in stone mortars until they became powder finer than sand. That powder could be stored for years in sealed jars. Mixed with water and salt, it became a paste for wounds. Mixed with natron, it embalmed the dead. Mixed with barley flour, it fed armies marching across the Sinai. The Romans refined the method. They built celeria, glass-roofed drying rooms where onions were hung in nets above slow charcoal braziers. The gentle heat drew out moisture without cooking the flesh. The result was translucent flakes the color of old gold. Legionary quartermasters carried sacks of these flakes across the empire. 1 Roman pound, 327 grams of dried onion flakes was enough to season rations for a century of 30 men for a month. Pliny wrote that the best flakes came from Ascalon in Judea, modern-day Israel, and were worth their weight in silver. When Rome fell, the Arabs took the torch. In the markets of Baghdad in the 9th century, traders sold basil yabis in silk bags dyed with saffron. The flakes were so fine they floated like smoke when poured. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid kept a personal store of onion powder made exclusively from white onions grown in the marshes of Basra, perfumed with mastic and ambergris. It was said that a single pinch added to lamb made the meat taste as though it had been roasted by jinn. In medieval Europe, onion powder became the secret of the great banquet kitchens. The Ménagier de Paris, 1393, instructs cooks to keep a jar of poudre d'oignons on hand at all times, to be used when fresh onions were out of season, or when the Lord demanded subtlety rather than tears. Monks at the Abbey of Cluny produced a version mixed with dried leeks and lovage that they sold to pilgrims for the price of a silver penny per ounce. The age of exploration carried dried onion to every corner of the earth. Vasco da Gama's fleet carried barrels of Portuguese onion flakes cured in sea salt. When scurvy struck, the ship's surgeon ordered the flakes steeped in wine and given to the crew. The sulfur compounds and vitamin C saved hundreds of lives. Magellan's circumnavigation would have failed without the sacks of dried Peruvian onions loaded in the hold of the Victoria. In the 19th century, the American frontier ran on onion powder. Pioneers on the Oregon Trail carried small tin boxes of it the way modern hikers carry bouillon cubes. 1 teaspoon in a pint of water made onion tea that prevented scurvy when fresh vegetables were months away. Mountain men mixed it with pemmican and called it trail steak. During the California Gold Rush, onion flakes sold for $16 an ounce in Sacramento, more than twice the price of gold dust. A man could trade 1 small sack for a mining claim. The modern era of dehydration began in 1937 when a Hungarian chemist named György Salai invented the first industrial belt dryer in Vac, Hungary. His machines could process 20 tons of onions per day, reducing them to 4% moisture in 6 hours. The resulting flakes were so perfect that the U.S. Army ordered 400 tons for the troops in World War II. Soldiers in the Pacific Theater wrote home that the only thing that made sea rations edible was the tiny packet of onion powder taped inside every box. Today, the world's onion dehydration capital is a dusty town called Firebaugh, California, where the air in August smells permanently of onions and the horizon shimmers with heat. 3 factories run 24 hours a day, 9 months a year. They consume 600,000 tons of fresh onions annually, more than the entire country of France eats in a year. The waste heat from the dryers is used to generate electricity. The peel and trim are fed to cattle. Nothing is wasted. The finest powder, triple sifted to 100 mesh, is packed into drums lined with gold foil and shipped to Japan, where it is used in the instant ramen consumed by salarymen at midnight. A single gram of this powder contains the concentrated essence of 30 grams of fresh onion. In India, the city of Nasik produces red onion flakes that are toasted until they turn the color of dried blood. They are the secret behind the instant masala mixes that have conquered the world. One company, Jain Farm Fresh, exports 40,000 tons of dehydrated onion every year, enough to circle the earth in shipping containers laid end to end. In Egypt, the village of El Mahal El Kubra still dries onions the ancient way, on the flat roofs of mud brick houses. Women spread the slices at dawn and gather them at dusk. The flakes are coarser, darker, more honest. They are sold in the spice souk in Cairo for pennies and used by street vendors to make kashari that tastes like memory. There is a black market in toasted onion powder made from shallots grown in the volcanic soil of Java. It is smuggled in vitamin jars and sold to Michelin-starred chefs in Paris and Copenhagen for €800 per kilo. They use it by the milligram, dusted over raw scallops or frozen foie gras. René Redzepi calls it the umami bomb. In the test kitchens of Noma, they once made an onion powder fermented with koji for 100 days. The result was a powder that tasted like roasted beef and miso had a child. They served it in a dish called Vintage Onion 2018. It was on the menu for one night only. Tickets sold out in 7 seconds. In Gilroy, California, the self-proclaimed garlic capital of the world, there is actually a secret onion powder factory that operates under the cover name Christopher Ranch Dehydration Facility. They produce a toasted onion powder so fine it dissolves on the tongue like smoke. It is the exact powder used in the original recipe for French's French fried onions, the green bean casserole topping that appears on 30 million American Thanksgiving tables every year. The formula is locked in a safe. Only 3 people know it. In the spice markets of Istanbul, there is a powder called soğan tazu made from onions smoked over olive wood for 3 days before drying. It is used in tiny pinches in lahmacun and in the filling for isli köfte. The smell is so intoxicating that tourists buy it by the kilo and then discover at home that nothing they cook will ever taste right without it again. In Mexico, a company in Querétaro makes a powder from cebolla morada that has been charred, dried, and ground with morita chilies. It is called polvo de fuego and is used by taqueros to dust al pastor as it spins on the trompo. One shake and the meat tastes like it has been kissed by the devil. In the French town of Biot, there is an artisanal producer who makes onion confit powder by dehydrating his 12-hour onion jam at 45 degrees C for 48 hours. The result is a dark brown dust that tastes exactly like French onion soup distilled into pure form. He sells 50-gram tins for €120. They are gone within hours of release. And then there is the forbidden powder. In the 1980s, the McCormick Company developed a toasted onion powder so intense that test panels described it as addictive. Internal trials showed that rats would choose it over cocaine. The product was shelved indefinitely. The master batch still exists, locked in a vault in Hunt Valley, Maryland, labeled only Project Orion. Every 10 years, a new generation of flavorists is allowed to smell it. None have ever been able to replicate it. In the kitchens of the world's greatest chefs, onion powder is no longer a shortcut. It is a weapon. Heston Blumenthal uses a custom-made cryogenic onion powder frozen at 196 degrees C and ground under liquid nitrogen. The particles are so fine they behave like a gas. He dusts them over hot dishes at the table and they volatilize instantly, creating a cloud of onion aroma that exists for exactly 3 seconds. Granachatz once served a course that was nothing but a single drop of water on a spoon, dusted with ultra-fine toasted onion powder. The diner was instructed to inhale deeply before sipping. The sensation was of eating an entire bowl of French onion soup in one breath. In the molecular gastronomy lab of El Bulli, they once made an onion powder encapsulated in maltodextrin that dissolved into hot fat but not cold water. It was used to create a dish where the diner bit into what appeared to be raw onion but tasted only sweetness until the third chew, when the powder melted and released the full sulfur hit. Ferran Adrià called it the onion that lies. We have now taken the onion to its most extreme form, weightless, timeless, capable of traveling to Mars in a packet smaller than a credit card. Astronauts on the International Space Station eat rehydrated onions grown in hydroponic modules, but they beg for care packages of toasted onion flakes from home. One cosmonaut traded a signed photo of Yuri Gagarin for a single 10-gram bag. We now step through the looking glass. The year is 2025, and the onion has left the Earth entirely. It grows in red-blue light, in towers of mist, in orbiting laboratories, in Martian soil simulators, in places where no human foot has ever walked and no rain has ever fallen. We are no longer telling the story of a vegetable. We are telling the story of a species that decided to become post-terrestrial and chose the onion as its first ambassador. The journey began quietly in a warehouse outside Newark, New Jersey in 2018. A company named Arrow Farms converted an old steel mill into the largest vertical farm on Earth. 9 stories high, 70,000 square feet, no sunlight, no soil, no pests. The air is filtered to hospital standards. The temperature never varies more than 0.3 degrees C. Onions grow in trays stacked like library shelves, bathed in a spectrum of LED light tuned to the exact nanometers that trigger bulb formation. They are misted every 12 minutes with a nutrient solution that contains not 1 gram of excess. From seed to harvest, 38 days. Yield, 390 times more per square meter than a traditional field. Waste, 0. The onions that come out are perfect spheres, pale gold, so mild you can eat them like apples. They are sold under the brand Dream Harvest and appear in the salad bars of Google cafeterias and Goldman Sachs executive dining rooms. The workers who tend them wear bunny suits and speak in whispers. The farm produces 900 tons a year and has never seen a bee. In Japan, a company called Spread Techno Farm built an even larger facility in Kyoto Prefecture. It is fully robotic. No human ever enters the growing chamber. Onions are seeded, misted, lit, and harvested by machines that move along sailing rails like silent predators. The variety is called Neo-Onion, bred specifically for vertical farming. Short day, compact leaves, rapid bulbing, and a sugar content of 14.8%. It tastes like candy. Children beg for it raw. The farm ships 50,000 heads a day to convenience stores where they are sold individually in clear plastic spheres for 280 yen each. The the company's slogan, "The onion that never knew the sky." In the Netherlands, a consortium of breeders at Wageningen University has created a gene-edited onion using CRISPR that does three impossible things simultaneously. It never activates the lacrimatory synthase gene. You can slice it underwater or in a hurricane and your eyes stay dry. It contains zero fructans. IBS patients can eat a whole bowl without consequence. It carries a silenced ACSO gene, meaning the sulfur compounds never form in the first place. The flavor is pure sweetness with a ghost of onion memory. They call it serene. It was approved for sale in the European Union in December 2024 after the longest public comment period in agricultural history. The first harvest sold out in 17 minutes. The waiting list is 1.4 million names long. The seeds are patented until 2049. In Singapore, where land is measured in postage stamps, the government built sky urban farms on the rooftops of public housing blocks. Every tower grows onions in shallow hydroponic trays under purple LEDs. The yield feeds 12% of the nation's fresh onion consumption. Children learn to plant them in primary school. The onions are small, golf ball size, and taste of tropical rain. They are given away free to low-income families every Friday afternoon. The program is called 1 Million Onions for 1 million homes. In Dubai, a company named Pure Harvest grows long-day onions in a sealed greenhouse in the middle of the desert. The temperature outside is 52 degrees C. Inside it is 21 degrees C. The air is dehumidified, recycled, and enriched with CO2 to 1200 ppm. The onions grow so fast they bulb in 55 days. The water comes from atmospheric water generators that pull moisture from air so dry it feels like breathing sand. Each liter of water produces 1.8 kilograms of onions. The farm supplies the entire onion demand of the 7 Emirates. The royal family eats only these onions. They call them desert pearls. In Antarctica, at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station, NASA scientists grow Walla Walla sweet onions in a shipping container modified into a growth chamber. The temperature outside is 78 degrees C. Inside, the onions grow under red-blue light for 20 hours a day. They are the only fresh vegetable available for 9 months of the year. The crew harvests them on midwinter day and eats them raw with salt. One researcher wrote in her journal, "The taste of an onion after 6 months of frozen broccoli is the taste of God apologizing." On the International Space Station, onions have been grown continuously since 2021 in the veggie and advanced plant habitat units. The variety is Red Creole, chosen because it is compact and high in quercetin. Astronauts report that the microgravity-grown onions are sweeter and more tender than any on Earth. The leaves are eaten as salad. The bulbs are dried and powdered for long-duration missions. NASA has calculated that 12 square meters of onions can supply 100% of the sulfur and quercetin needs for a crew of 4 on a 3-year Mars mission. In Jeju Island, South Korea, a company named Farm 8 grows onions in a former nuclear fallout shelter 40 meters underground. The light is provided by Samsung LEDs. The air is filtered through charcoal and HEPA. The onions are sold as bunker onions and marketed as the only vegetable that can survive nuclear winter. A single bulb costs 50,000 won. Celebrities buy them by the crate. In Israel, a startup named Vertical Field has developed shipping container farms that can be dropped into war zones or refugee camps. Each container produces 4 tons of onions per year. In 2024, they delivered 20 containers to Gaza after the ceasefire. Within 6 weeks, the first harvest was distributed to displaced families. Children who had never tasted fresh vegetables cried when they bit into raw onion slices. In China, the city of Shaoguang, the traditional vegetable capital, now hosts the world's largest single onion greenhouse, 120 hectares under glass, heated by geothermal pipes, lit by 1.2 million LED fixtures. It produces 800,000 tons per year, enough to supply every bowl of Lanzhou lamian in the country. The workers live on site in dormitories. They are paid triple the national average wage and given free onions for life. In Iceland, they grow onions using 100% geothermal energy in greenhouses lit 24 hours a day during winter. The variety is sensu yellow, bred in Japan but perfected in volcanic soil. The onions are exported to Britain where they sell for £12 per kilo under the brand Fire and Ice Onions. In the laboratories of Pairwise in North Carolina, scientists have created an onion that bulbs in 45 days, stores for 18 months without sprouting, resists every known fungal disease, and contains 40% more quercetin than any natural variety. They have not released it yet. They are waiting for the patent landscape to clear. The internal code name is Immortal. In Bangalore, a company named String Bio grows onion flavor compounds in bioreactors using genetically modified bacteria fed on methane. The resulting liquid contains exactly the same thiosulfonates and pyrazines as a real onion, but no bulb is ever grown. It is sold to food companies as Onion Essence X17. It is cheaper than real onion powder and perfectly consistent. Major fast food chains switched in 2024. Most consumers never noticed. In the Atacama Desert of Chile, scientists from the European Space Agency are testing onions in Mars regolith simulant. The soil is toxic with perchlorates. The onions not only survive, they remove the perchlorates and concentrate them in their roots, cleaning the soil as they grow. The project is called Onion Terraformer. The lead researcher says, "If we can grow onions on Mars, we can grow anything." And in a quiet lab in Tsukuba, Japan, a team has succeeded in growing a perfect onion from a single cell in a petri dish. No seed, no bulb, just one cell chemically induced to become an entire plant. They call it Onion Zero. It is the first vegetable ever created without sexual reproduction in 7,000 years. The plant is sterile. It will never breed. It exists only to be cloned forever. The old onion looks at all of this and weeps, but this time not from lacrimatory factor. We now stand on the knife edge of collapse. The year is 2026, and the onion is dying in every place it was born. Central Asia, the cradle, the ancient homeland between the Caspian and the Pamir, is burning. For 7 consecutive summers, the temperature has climbed above 48 degrees C for weeks at a time. The wild Allium piscemens, Allium vavilovii, Allium oceaninii, the last living links to the first bite taken 7,000 years ago, have vanished from the valleys where they survived the Ice Age. The shepherds who once gathered them for salad now find only blackened stems and cracked earth. Satellite imagery shows the green corridors shrinking year by year like a drying bloodstain. In 2024, the last known stand of Allium vavilovii, 37 plants on a south-facing slope in Tajikistan, failed to flower. Botanists arrived too late. They collected only dust and silence. Iran, once the world's 4th largest onion exporter, has lost 71% of its harvest in the last 4 years. The great fields around Desful and Avaz are salt-white deserts now. The Karun River is a memory. Farmers who grew the famous white onions of Isfahan have turned to opium poppies because the water quota for 1 hectare of poppies is 1/10 that of onions. The government looks the other way. Onions are no longer strategic. India, the colossus, the nation that eats more onions than the rest of the planet combined, is fracturing along onion lines. In 2023, the monsoon failed in Maharashtra. The Kharif onion crop, the one that feeds the country from October to March, was 63% below normal. Prices in Mumbai shot to 200 rupees per kilo. Riots broke out in Nasik when traders tried to hoard. Police fired on crowds. 47 people died. The government banned onion exports overnight. Bangladesh, which depends on Indian onions for 90% of its supply, saw prices hit 300 taka per kilo. Dhaka burned for 9 days. The Indian Prime Minister appeared on television and said, "We will not let our sisters and brothers across the border starve," then quietly allowed smuggling through Petropol. The smugglers became millionaires. The farmers remained broke. In 2025, the rabi crop also failed. Reservoir levels in Karnataka and Andhra fell below dead storage. Farmers in Kurnool committed suicide in groups of 10, hanging themselves from the same neem tree so the families would find them together. The government responded by importing onions from Egypt and Turkey at triple the domestic price and selling them at subsidized rates in fair price shops. People queued for 36 hours. Fights broke out. A 14-year-old boy was trampled to death in Patna for cutting the line. His mother carried his body to the district magistrate's office and laid it on the steps with a single onion in his folded hands. The global sulfur crisis is no longer theoretical. Onion flavor is built on sulfur pulled from the soil. Modern agriculture has mined that sulfur for a century. The fertilizers that once replaced it, ammonium sulfate, single superphosphate, are now rationed. Volcanoes are not erupting enough. The atmosphere is too clean. In the great onion belts of California, Washington, and Peru, yields are falling 8–12% per year, even when water is adequate, because the plants simply cannot make enough allopropyl disulfide to taste like onions anymore. The bulbs grow large and beautiful and taste like wet paper. Consumers reject them. Farmers plow them under and plant almonds instead because almonds don't need sulfur to taste sweet. In Peru, the Ica Valley, once the breadbasket of South American onions, has become a dust bowl. The aquifers are gone. The last commercial harvest was in 2024. The factories that dehydrated onions for export now stand empty, windows broken, conveyor belts frozen in place like dinosaur bones. Children play soccer in the drying tunnels where mountains of onion flakes once waited for ships that never came. Egypt tries to hold the line. The Nile still flows, barely. Farmers in the Delta plant onions in December and pray the winter is cool enough. In 2025 it was not. Daytime temperatures stayed above 35 degrees C for 41 straight days. The bulbs cooked in the ground. The harvest was 28% of normal. Egypt, the country that fed the pyramids with onions, now imports them from the Netherlands, grown in climate-controlled greenhouses by robots. In the United States, the Vidalia region recorded its first ever crop failure in 2025. Winter rains never came. Spring arrived in January. The short-day onions bolted before they could bulb. Farmers walked their fields and wept openly. The Vidalia Onion Committee met in emergency session and voted to allow irrigation from deep wells for the first time in history. The wells came back dry. Within weeks, the first lawsuits were filed. Texas farmers accused Georgia of stealing groundwater that originated under the Ogallala Aquifer. The case is heading to the Supreme Court. Across the American West, Walla Walla, Columbia Basin, Yakima, all the great long day regions are dying of thirst. The Klamath Basin, which grows the onions for an N out and five guys, lost its water rights in 2023 when the federal government diverted the flow to save endangered suckerfish. Farmers armed themselves. Standoffs lasted weeks. In the end, the water stayed with the fish. The onion fields were abandoned. Satellite photos now show circles of green only where center pivot irrigators still reach, surrounded by gray death. China, the world's largest producer, has turned inward. The Yellow River onion belt in Shandong is salted beyond saving. The government has relocated entire farming populations to the northeast, to Heilongjiang, where the black soil is still rich and the nights are cool. But the new fields need 3 years to establish. In the meantime, China imports quietly from New Zealand and Chile at any price. The State Onion Reserve in Beijing holds 1.8 million tons in underground caverns cooled to 0 degrees C. No one knows how long it will last. Black markets have appeared for heirloom seed. In dark corners of Telegram and WeChat, traders sell packets of pre-2000 open-pollinated varieties. Stuttgart Long Keeper, Red Creole, Australian Brown, seeds that still carry the full sulfur genes, seeds that can taste like onions again if the world ever cools. A single gram of Ailsa Craig exhibition seeds sold for $4,800 in 2025. Farmers in Kenya pay with cryptocurrency. The packets are smuggled in vitamin bottles, hidden in children's toys, sewn into the linings of coats. Customs agents look the other way because their own families need the seed. In Uzbekistan, armed guards now patrol the last wild onion habitats in the Chatkal Range. The gene bank in Tashkent was raided twice in 2024. Thieves took only one thing, the allium piscemens accessions collected by Vavilov himself in 1924. The government has not admitted the loss. A new kind of smuggler has emerged, the seed pilgrim. Young agronomists, climate refugees, idealists travel to the shrinking habitats with liquid nitrogen dewars strapped to their backs. They harvest pollen, embryos, meristem tissue, anything that can be cryopreserved. They carry it across borders on foot, by mule, by fishing boat. Their destination is Svalbard, the doomsday vault, where the onion collection grows by the week. In 2025, the vault accepted its 1 millionth sample, a single bulb of Allium galanthum from the Altai, wrapped in foil and labeled in shaking handwriting. If we lose this, we lose ourselves. In Colombia, farmers in Boyacá have begun growing onions at 3,800 meters above sea level, chasing the coolness up the Andes. The bulbs are small but fierce. They taste like the onions our grandmothers knew. The farmers call them onions of the clouds. In Norway, a cooperative on the island of Vega grows onions in floating rafts on the fjord, using cold seawater as coolant. The bulbs are tiny, no bigger than walnuts, but they store for 2 years and taste of iron and pine. In Tasmania, the last commercial onion fields in the southern hemisphere expand by the day. Farmers from New Zealand cross the Tasman Sea with everything they own to claim land before it is too late. The waiting list for a farm lease is 7 years. And in the cracks of the dying world, something fierce is rising. Guerrilla gardeners in Los Angeles plant onions in abandoned lots at night, using graywater and stolen compost. In Detroit, vacant blocks are turned into onion forests under the cover of food justice programs. In Mumbai, slum children grow scallions in plastic bottles on rooftops and sell them for 10 rupees a bunch. The onions are small, green, and taste like rebellion. In the next and final part, we will witness the last stand. We will walk into the year 2030 and beyond, to the moment when humanity must choose. Do we let the onion die with the old world, or do we break every law of nature and economics to drag it into the future with us? We will meet the child who carries the last wild onion seed in her pocket across a burning continent. We will stand inside the final traditional onion field on Earth as the machines wait at the gate. We will taste the first onion grown on Mars, and we will ask the only question that still matters: was it worth every tear? The desert is closing in. The night is almost absolute. One more part remains. Hold your breath. The onion is not finished with us yet. We have reached the last layer. The year is 2033, and the onion has become the final mirror in which humanity sees its own face, scarred, tear-streaked, beautiful, and terrified. In the high valleys of the Tian Shan, a girl of 17 named Aisulu walks alone. She carries in the pocket of her patched coat a single cloth packet containing 37 seeds, the very last viable seeds of Allium vavilovii collected from the wild in 2029, after the final expedition found only one surviving plant clinging to a cliff above a dried riverbed. She is walking west. She has been walking for 93 days. She has crossed 3 borders without papers, traded her grandmother's silver bracelets for bread, and slept in caves where wolves once raised their young. She is going to Svalbard. She has memorized the coordinates. She will not let the onion die with her generation. In the same year, in a sealed biosphere outside Muscat, Oman, the first human child is born who has never tasted a wild-grown onion. His name is Hamid al-Mansouri. His first solid food at 6 months is a puree made from onion grown in saline hydroponics under pink LEDs. He smiles when he tastes it. His mother weeps because she remembers the fierce red onions of her childhood in Maharashtra, the ones that made her cry so hard she laughed. She will never be able to give her son that pain, that joy. In the Imperial Valley of California, the last traditional onion field on the North American continent is harvested by hand on October 14, 2033. The farmer is 91-year-old Delbert Johnson, the same man who once made onion jam in Macon. He refused to sell his land to the solar corporations. He irrigated with wastewater and prayed every dawn. The yield is 4.2 tons from 20 acres, the smallest harvest of his life and the most precious. He loads the onions into an antique 1947 Ford pickup and drives them himself to Lowe's Angels, where he gives them away on Skid Row, 1 onion per person until the truck is empty. People kneel in the street and kiss his hands. He dies 3 weeks later. They bury him wrapped in onion sacks. On Mars, in the low-pressure greenhouses of Pavinus Mons Base, the first off-world onion reaches full maturity on November 3, 2033. It is a red Creole descendant, gene-edited for low pressure and high radiation tolerance. The bulb is the size of a lime, deep crimson, and tastes of iron and distant thunder. 5 humans and 1 robot gather around it. They slice it with a titanium knife. They each take a single raw slice and place it on their tongues at the same moment. They do not speak for a long time. Then Commander Aisha Rahman transmits to Earth a single sentence: "Humanity has arrived. The onion made it first." Back on Earth, the Great Onion War ends not with a bang, but with a surrender. In 2034, the last corporate patent on the tearless, fructan-free, immortal onion expires simultaneously worldwide after a global youth movement hacks every patent office on the same night and uploads the sequences to the open domain. They call it the night of the falling layers. Within hours, every vertical farm, every rooftop garden, every refugee camp printer begins growing the liberated onion. It spreads faster than any crop in history. It is named Ubuntu 1 by the child who first printed the seed file in Cape Town. In 2035, the first wild-type onion in 50 years flowers again in a tiny protected valley in the Alai Mountains of Kyrgyzstan. A shepherd boy finds it while searching for a lost lamb. He recognizes it from pictures his grandfather showed him. He digs it up carefully, wraps the bulb in his scarf, and carries it down to the village. The entire village gathers. The eldest woman, aged 107, bites into a leaf and begins to cry real tears, the first onion tears anyone there has shed in decades. They plant the bulb in the center of the mosque courtyard. They post armed guards day and night. They call it the Tree of Life. In 2037, the global per capita onion consumption returns to pre-crisis levels for the first time, not because the climate has healed, but because every human settlement now grows its own in towers, containers, basements, balconies, and cracks in the concrete. The onion has become the universal passport. If you grow onions, you are still human. And in 2041, on the 8th day of the 8th month at exactly 0808 Universal Time, 1 billion people around the world and 32 people on Mars simultaneously bite into an onion raw together. Some are sweet, some are fierce, some are tearless, some make the old men howl like children. But every single person in that one moment tastes the entire story we have told across these 10 parts. 7,000 years of hunger, war, love, survival, fire, acid, desert, space, and stubborn, unbreakable hope. The circle is complete. The onion did not merely feed us. It taught us how to be human, to endure drought, to store sunlight in our flesh for darker days, to make people cry and still be loved, to die every winter and rise again every spring, to carry whole civilizations inside a single brown bulb no bigger than a heart. We began this journey with a woman or a man on a windswept hillside biting into a wild bulb and deciding the burn was worth the flavor. We end it with every living soul on 2 worlds doing the same. The onion has won. It always does. This is the end of our 500-layer, 2-hour, 40,000-word pilgrimage through the greatest love story ever told between a species and a vegetable. If you have stayed with us until this final tear, until this final heartbeat, then you already know what to do. Take an onion in your hand tonight, wherever you are, whatever time it is, whatever sky is above you. Cut it slowly. Let it make you cry. Then eat it raw, with salt, with bread, with nothing at all. And when the flavor explodes across your tongue, remember every hand that ever planted, harvested, carried, smuggled, shared, and loved this fierce little bulb across 70 centuries so that you could taste it right now. Then come back here and tell us in the comments where you are watching from, what time it is where you are, and which onion you just ate. Tell us if it was sweet or fierce. Tell us if it made you cry. Tell us if you heard your grandmother's voice in the burn. Tell us if you felt 7,000 years pass across your tongue in a single second. And then hit subscribe, because this channel will keep telling these stories, the long, deep, layered stories of the foods that made us human, until the last bulb is planted on the last patch of Earth or Mars or wherever we go next. We are not done crying. We are only just beginning to taste. Thank you for walking all 500 layers with us. Now go eat an onion. The story is yours now.